What's going on, creative family? It's Dustin Valkema. Guys, welcome back to another video. Today is all about building and painting light. It's the macro dodge and burn that I get so many questions on. It's insane. Like, how do you make that 3D effect and that pop? Where do you get your painterly look? What plugins do you use? Guys, I don't use plugins. I simply use macro dodge and burn. I like to paint light. It's one of those things for me that I do in almost every single one of my photos. So let's go ahead and talk about it, guys. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. I will see y'all in Photoshop. Alright guys, here we are in Photoshop taking a look at this photo of my buddy Geoff, insanely talented 3D artist, also my photography assistant. You guys will see Geoff here off and on throughout the channel, whether it's being one of the BTS guys or even giving his own tutorials for 3D stuff and modeling and whatnot. Now, before we get started with the macro dodge and burn process, why don't we go ahead here and actually create these actions so that you guys can use this in your own work without hassle. And no, I'm not giving out the actions for these. It's just not something I believe in doing all the time. I'd rather show you guys how to build these and then you can build them yourself. So the first thing we want to do is bring up our actions panel, which is Alt or Option F9. We can head up here into Window and click on the Actions button, and that will pop up this actions window here, this panel for us. Let's go ahead and create our dodge action. So with doing that, we can go ahead and create a new action. Call it dodge. Go ahead and record that. Now the process in which we're doing this is, I'll do a tutorial on creating complex actions or just things that are a little bit more in depth, because sometimes there are ways that you need to go about clicking around and paying attention to your selections. So this may not be perfect the first time. I haven't really rebuilt these actions yet. So let's see how they go. Now, with that started, now we're recording. So anything that we do will be recorded in this action. So we can click down here on this group icon. And what we're going to do is just click that and name this Dodge, D-O-D-G-E. Now this is going to be our container for the effects that we're going to be creating. Now next, if we press Alt or Option and click our layer mask button, that will give us a black layer mask. And that will just mean that nothing that we're currently doing below this will appear until we paint on that mask. Now, if you guys don't understand what we're doing here, you can do this without making this mask black. But I just find it, for the sake of this type of a tutorial, that with the way that we're adjusting these, you'll see what we're doing from there. So it should be fine. Now, if we go ahead and create a curves adjustment layer, we can name this Brighten. Now this is already going to be nested inside of that group layer there, so we don't need to worry about that. And we can go through and adjust. Now for this brighten action, all we're doing is wanting to brighten the pixels of our image. So we're going to create 2 points here. This first one we're going to do, we'll say about 65 for the input, and output, we can bring that up a little bit, maybe 105-ish. It doesn't necessarily have to be completely perfect. And we can leave this here if we want. A lot of times I like to go and create another pin here just so that we have a little bit more control. And so for this one here, usually I like to have them at about 140. This is just kind of what works for me. And then bringing that up to about 190-ish. Oh, lost it a little bit. And that's fine. So really all we're doing is we're just adding a little bit more control to the way that we are brightening up this image. Now from there, we can go ahead and create a hue saturation layer. Now this is going to be used primarily to desaturate our highlights as we're painting with a dodge, just to make sure that we have a little bit more control over the hue and saturation. So right away we can name this layer desat. And so that should be set up, and we can set this master saturation to, we'll say -10, and that should work just fine. So from here, the last thing we want to do with this hue saturation layer selected is press Alt right bracket. And what that's going to do is just move forward one layer in our composition here, so that as these, if we're doubling up and creating more of these dodge groups to have, you know, multiple layers of the dodge going on, it's just automatically going to select that dodge instead of accidentally nesting it into another action, so, or into another group as they get created. So we can sort of show you how that looks here if we go ahead and just press stop on this action. And we can see that if we grab our brush tool, now for me, I do have this saved, this brush. It's just a regular soft round brush with an opacity of 100, pen pressure sensitivity on, and then flow at 15%. And I find that's generally what works best for my personal liking. And it lets you build up fairly quickly, but not too fast as to get lost in what I'm doing. So you can kind of see the effects here as we start to paint these in. Just kind of make quick work of it. And now we have a decent dodge layer set up. So if we want to create another dodge layer, we can go ahead and just select dodge here, and then we can play that action again. And then, like I said, it's just going to create another dodge group, and we can use that to continue intensifying some of the light that's going on in here in the scene. Now, I do generally like to work with having multiple layers to the dodge or the burn, and that is primarily because it gets very easy to get lost in one layer, and I don't want to say it's destructive because it technically is non-destructive, but you do get lost sometimes when you're working on complex edits, especially when we're working with a micro dodge and burn for blemish removal, and we'll get into that here at a later video. This one here is just overall for some kind of a general pop and working this way. So with that there, that is how we create our dodge action. So let's go ahead and create the burn action. So now to get started creating the burn action, it's really the same process as we just did for our dodge. I just deleted all of our layers here so that we can work with a clean slate. So let's go ahead and create a new action. Can name that burn, click record, head down and create a new group. We can name that burn. And then create a negative or a black filled layer mask with Alt and then clicking the layer mask button there. Now from here, we can head to our curves. Let's name this. Can name that darken. And then from here, this is really the same process that we're doing from the last one, except just the opposite. So we can go ahead and drag down these points here. We'll drag these down quite a ways, and we're just wanting them to get dark without being too far. So that should be fine. Yeah, we can set somewhere around there. And then for our second point, now say 190 looks about right. And then we can just sort of play with these values here. And that looks about right. I think generally speaking, I could do this with just one curve. Maybe that would be easier. There are times where I go back and adjust these anyway, so it's not too nitpicky. I just in my head kind of know what this is looking at as far as the way that this histogram looks here in the curves palette. So for me, it's easy to see. For some of you, it may not be if you're not used to working with curves too often. So anyways, now with the darken curves already adjusted, let's go ahead and throw another hue saturation in here. And for this one, we can just call it sat for saturation, bump up our master saturation to +10. And that's just giving a little bit more color to our shadows as we paint them in versus our highlights getting bright and possibly, you know, too far with their saturation, in which case we're bringing them down. So having a positive 10 here for saturation is just giving us a little bit of extra color bump there when we're painting our shadows. And then at this point we can press Alt or Option and click the right bracket again to take us to the layer that is directly above, which is our initial burn state. So we can go ahead and click stop, and then we can paint here. And we'll see that this is just simply going through and darkening and giving just a little bit more color to those darker pixels there. Now we can also double up on this now because of the way that we ran our selection, and we can just play that there, and it's going to continue creating new layers that we can work from. So this is a pretty good method that gets you all set up and everything works fine. We can go ahead and delete these layers. If you did want to go and create a dodge and burn, just one action for that, we can go ahead and just create a new action, dodge. Actually, we can just go ahead and just call it dodge and burn. We can go to record. We can stop this. And if we, let's see, if we hold Control and Alt, bring these down, does it duplicate? Yep, it does. So it goes and duplicates this here. So we should be able to simply bring both of these down. And this should go ahead and set this up for us to where we can run both of these actions. And now it runs a strict dodge and burn for both of these here. Now, in the perfect world, what I would generally do is close this group, but we didn't do that for that action. It's very easy. You can go ahead and just make sure to close that so we don't have to worry about that there. But now this is set up, so you have your dodge action, your burn action, and then your dodge and burn combined if you want them that way. All right, now that we have those actions set up, we can start the process of making this image pop. First thing I do is press Control or Command J, and I duplicate this. This is going to be my blemish removal layer. As you guys can see, this photo is not perfectly in focus, but nobody noticed when it was finished. Nobody said anything. So guys, sometimes you can work with things that are not perfect and still create awesome art with it. Just know that. So the first thing that I'm doing here is just going to remove a few of the bigger blemishes. Now, this is not normally how I would do it. This is just with a patch tool. It's a quick and effective way to get rid of distractions and blemishes. So we'll go through here and remove a couple of these bigger areas. Now, this is normally where I would use something like the healing brush and even a micro dodge and burn. So luckily we just went through and we created the actions for those. So once we get to the micro dodge and burn tutorials, those will already be created and we won't have to do that a second time. So let's go through here, find a couple of these bigger areas, just remove some of those. I like to get rid of some of this stuff here in the image before I start dodging and burning. Most of the time it's simply so that it's not really a distraction. Sometimes you can run into big issues and those will need to be taken care of anyways. This is just rough and I guess to the point. So that there, before and after, doesn't need to be too heavy. So we can go ahead and just play this dodge and burn action that we just created to set up both groups. And go ahead and close those, select our dodge. Again, my brush tool is just a soft round brush with pen pressure sensitivity on, flow at 15%. And this is where we get started. So now I just go ahead here and I like to accentuate my key light. first of all, and we're just going to go through and brush some of these areas. And it's generally really any area that's going to, or that would be, say, facing the light here. I will use it in some shadow areas like this here, such as like eye bags, and I'll just go through and do a quick paint over on those anyways. Same thing with this side here. Just go through and try to bump those up just a little bit so that they're not so drastic. And then we can go and accentuate some of this light that's happening here. Kind of emulate maybe a little bit more of like a Rembrandt style lighting. Just kind of pop that triangle in there a little bit. It was there somewhat to begin with. Now throughout this process, I'm pressing X, and that is just toggling my foreground and background color from black to white so that I can paint somewhere I need it and then get rid of it where I don't. Now, it may be useful for you to have a couple different brushes set up for yourself. This one here, with having the opacity at 100 and flow at 15%, it gives me a little bit of a quicker build up, but it is nice when I'm working and I need some quick control. So my dodge layer, fairly simply put, this is just going through and accentuating my key light. Now I have my burn layer, which I'm going to use to add a little bit of emphasis to the shadows, kind of maybe, you know, areas like this here where it can help the hairline just a little bit. I may bring a little bit of a little bit more of a shadow there. Going through, we can accentuate some of the shadows on the side here of the face, maybe down a little bit into the beard, but I usually don't hit that too hard because it's already a shadowed area. We can go through and deepen some of the shadows here to help those furrowed brow stand out a little bit more. Just a couple of these here on the front side. I think that's about it. We don't really need too much here. See, yeah, that's about all that I might do here as far as the dodge and burn is concerned. Now, I do like to get into doing the irises and my catch lights here. So the way that I'll do those, and you can set this up for its own curve as well, or sorry, its own action. You can just go through and create a new curves, and we can bring those midtones up quite a way. Now with these here, what we're looking for is primarily having a lot more detail that's brighter inside of the iris and the catch light. The skin doesn't really matter here. And so what we can do is press Control or Command I on that layer mask there, and that will just get rid of that and invert it. So we can grab our white brush and we can use that here to paint some light into the catch light here. We can do that on the opposing side. And now what I like to do here is I kind of fake some of the iris detail. I just, actually I could do that with an even smaller brush. And I just go and I scribble. Just remember that this is additive right now, so I can always remove some of this. And then we'll do the same thing on this side. And we're literally just scribbling. You see, these details here aren't really perfect anyway. So I do see a lot of people trying to go through and make perfect lines and this and that. We're definitely not working on a macro shot of the eye, so the detail there doesn't have to be insane, but we're just trying to accentuate it. And so what we'll do here is we can pop the iris right on the other side of that catch light. Do the same thing here, kind of bump and add some detail there. We can go ahead and press X for black brush here, and we can get rid of some of this as it heads up there on the other side. So now you can see here that we're getting a nice little pop to any of our iris detail, and our eyes are just kept popping out now. So at this point, if we go back to the original, you can see here that we have a really nice dodge and burn from a macro level, just a very high level that's giving us a lot of the detail. So now we can start layering up some light here. So if we go ahead and we select our dodge action and we play that again, that'll create a whole new layer for us. I can select my dodge and burn brush, and we can go ahead and we can just start to push just a little bit more light from the key side here. And we can maybe get a little bit more detail with certain aspects that we're going to accentuate. And a little bit there on the nose and the nostril. We can pull in some more light here to this cheek. Maybe on this side. If we want to actually paint a little bit maybe on our eyeballs, we can do that. I don't like to take that too far most of the time, but in this case it gives kind of a nice comical effect to it. So I might go ahead and bounce a little bit in there. Maybe even on his shoulder here just a little bit to help that kind of stand out and separate. Do some on the beard with the gel light here. Go ahead and do that on both sides. Give it a really nice rim to the red. So now at this point, we've got a really nice buildup of light. The last bit of dodge that I generally like to do is adding some kind of a shine to the skin. And so we can actually grab a curves and we can bring that up a little bit. And really what I'm looking for here is to the point just before our skin gets clipped out and we start to lose detail there with overexposure. Now with that created, if I go ahead and I double click this curves layer, that's going to bring up my blend if options. And you'll see here, if I start to play with this underlying layer, we can remove that overexposure from all of the shadows. And so what we'll do here is we can take it out of the shadows to a certain point, and then we can also break this by pressing Option or Alt and then dragging this handle out a ways. And we can add just a type of shine. I usually call it kind of like a moisturized shine or something similar there to the skin. So if we click OK, you can see that just in those areas now of the skin, we've got a really nice kind of highlight. A lot of times we use this same method when we're doing like actual skin retouching to add a nice shine or glimmer to that bit of the skin. But yeah, guys, so this really wraps up the tutorial here at its core. I just wanted to run through this macro dodge and burn process with you guys and show you how I would generally go about adding this type of a look. You can get really nice sort of gritty looks this way, as well as once you get to your selective sharpening, you can go ahead and over sharpen for a really nice gritty look, or add a subtle pop that just gives some nice fresh detail to it. So yeah, guys, we'll wrap this up here. All right, guys, so that wraps up this tutorial on macro dodge and burn. Hopefully you guys found something in here that you could use and add to your arsenal. If you did, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Smack that bell icon so that you get notified as I upload new content. Guys, we finally hit 2K subs. I'm so excited. I appreciate each and every one of you guys here. Now, I'm currently working on that 2K Q&A video, so keep an eye out for that. I've also got a really sweet announcement for one of my favorite Photoshop plugins. I'm literally calling it the Photoshop plugin of 2020. So we'll be able to get here soon. That's going to be getting released here as that plugin gets closer to launch. And yeah, guys, so exciting stuff coming. Make sure to create more, say less, and stay creative, folks. I'll see you guys in the next video. Looking forward to it.